Hi everyone, it's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and I'm here today with something entirely different from anything you've ever seen on this channel. Today I'm taking a quilt apart, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing that and hopefully show you how I fix a problem right after this. Most of the time when we're quilting, our projects come out great and they look good. Well, I had an instance where I created a project and it really looked good until I started looking really close. And what I quickly discovered was I had made a boo-boo. Now, big deal, you say. It's not going in a show. No one's going to look at it. I'm not going to be judged by it, but it bothers me. And it bothers me because it's a simple thing that I should have caught when I was checking to make sure every block matched every other block, or that block I was working on followed the pattern. And somehow in this project, I think because we were trying to wrap it through and get it finished before the holiday, I missed it. Okay, so it's not a big deal, right? And most of you, and me included, would probably just leave it. But I see this as an opportunity to maybe take you through the steps of how I would fix this. Now, we are very lucky, or I'm very lucky, that the error on this quilt lies close to the edge of the border of the quilt. And while I could take everything out to this and take all the quilting and the piecing out and put it back together, I'm going to try not to have to do that. I want to try to fix it in place. Now, what we're going to do, let me check our camera, our overhead. There we go. The error on this is right here, and it's this little 4-patch block that has twisted around, and instead of being the red spots here, the red spots are here. So the piece itself is fine. It's just a matter that it's lying in the quilt in the wrong direction. Now, we could take this out, and we could take the binding off, and we could go in and rip out the seams and restitch it like I said. But I'm going to try to do it by taking this piece out and seeing if we can't place it back where it is. For me, that's going to require some hand stitching because in this area there is no quilting. If you had a project that had quilting, you could lay the pieces down on top of it and just disguise it or patch it. I'm going to try not to do that. That is the option that we have if this doesn't work, as is taking everything else and repiecing it. So let's get started. I think we're all lined up overhead so you can see what's going on, and I'm going to shift it out just a little bit so we make sure to keep that good line up with what we're doing. Now, I have actually 3 more pieces. I've got enough here to make another 4-patch, and I have an extra 2-patch if I need it. I'm going to try to use this one here, but if we need to make another one, we can. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to start right here on this seam, and we're going to start ripping out seams. Now I've got a nice sharp seam ripper, and I've got a great pair of little scissors that have a really sharp point on them. So if I need to use that, I can. But we're going to just start here, and we're going to try to take out as little as we can. I want to try to keep it so you can see what I'm doing, but I also don't want to take the chance of damaging this more than I need to. Okay, we got it started. I'm just popping those stitches along the edge. Now, let me just say this before we get too far into this. It's probably going to take me a while to do this, and instead of having you sit painlessly through ripping a bunch of seams, I think what I'm going to do is strategically cut the video and edit it together so that you can see all the steps, but you don't necessarily have to sit through the painful seam ripping. But I did want to do this first seam to show you that you can go in there and take it out even on a finished quilt. And that's beyond being careful, because you don't want to rip. Let's say, for example, I'm working here on the sashing. If I get in there and rip the sashing or poke a hole in the sashing, I'm going to have to replace it too. And you could, if you had a really bad day and a slippery ripper, you could end up doing a lot more damage, frankly, than the twisted seam is. But we're going to try to avoid that and just work slowly and deliberately in what we're doing and make it work. So let's just do this first seam, and then I will just pick up each time we do something new so you can see that. And there'll be frequent times where the video may go at a faster speed so that we can kind of bring it together. You can actually see it, but you don't need to see real time. Okay, now we've got that first seam unhooked, and I'm going to go a little bit further. Now, if you don't think that your hand stitching skills are practiced enough to be able to put this piece on, you may want to go with the machine stitching and rip it out. But I think that that's something that I can manage, and I'm going to take it out. I'm going to leave at least 2 stitches here, and I'm probably just going to go about halfway onto the sashing. That'll give me enough room to maneuver and yet still get it taken out. So now we've got a pocket in here this big, and we're going to come in here and we're going to take these seams out, and we'll just see what happens. Okay, I'm going to dip back in here and tell you where I am. I have taken the 4 patch out, and I've taken this seam here up about 3/4 of an inch and this one about the same. I've left the quilting intact here, and I've left the last few stitches in place. And then here I've taken it back about a little more than 1/4 of an inch, and here probably about 3/4 of an inch. And they're still folded exactly like they were when they were pressed, so we've got that working for us. Now let's take a look at how they should go. This is how they should go. And what I can see is that some of my pressing folds are good and can stay, and some of them need to be changed. Now I'm going to be able to sew this piece right here back the way it was, so that can slip under. Now this can either go like this or like this. And what I would like to do, no, I'm sorry, I had that backwards. See, I was going to mess it up again. Okay, this can be sewn in the way it's folded right now. We can sew hand stitch here and hand stitch here. If we could get at least one of these machine stitched, and I think the secret may be to stitch this side right here. Well, let me think about that a minute. It needs to go like this or like this. And I think this is the better fit. So what I'm going to do is, okay, we're going to press this seam out. Let me get a couple of pins so I can kind of mark that. We're going to press this seam out. And we're going to press this one under. Now the reason I need to fold this out is for fit, because while it's supposed to be a square, the likelihood that it's actually a square in here is pretty unlikely. So by folding that out, we could slightly adjust that fit. I have pressed out the seam we wanted pressed out, and pressed in the one we wanted pressed in. Got one little place right here. Let's get it going in the right direction. And then let's see how this lines up now. Paying careful attention to placement. Okay, I think our sizing looks good. See, if you can see there, you can see we're lined up right on that seam line, right on this seam line, around this seam line, and we've got a little tail here on this one. Now, we're going to need probably a little marker. I prefer to use a little fine tip disappearing marker for this, because some of the felt tip ones are, they spread too much. So we're going to line this up, and then we're going to mark where this seam is going to go. Okay, so that's pressed open, and now we want to try to place that little blue mark that we had. And I'm going to reinforce that on the back a little bit so I can see it. Okay, so let's see. Let's see if we can line those up together and get them on here. It's going to be a bit of a challenge to pull this over to our machine. Let's see what we can do. You know, you don't know until you try. We do want to try to line up the ends of those. That was my iron. Okay. Okay, so I've got this pinned onto this piece here, this little flap we had. And I had everything lined up so well here, but we're going to have to move it. Not the easiest thing in the world, by far. Okay, we don't really care if it's a 1/4 inch seam or not. We want it to sew where those dots are. And we certainly do not want a bird's nest. I'm going to make my seam just a little bit, stitches just a little bit longer. Okay, that was right on that dot. That's good. Okay, we've got a little problem there at the end because our piece that's affixed to our quilt came unfolded. So we're going to just fold it right in place. Okay, we are stitched through. It got a little bit off there at the very end. Let's see how it works, because it might not be enough to matter. Okay. Okay. So there's our piece that we sewed right there, and we lined it up with those little dots. And if we fold that back out, I think that's going to work really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press it. I think I've got enough under here. Maybe. I don't want to make my cutting board warp. It feels really rough, like there's something under there. Oh, it's a seam on the backing. I'll do this. And then flip it over. Now, we're a little bit long right here, but so very little that I don't really think it's going to matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it in place. And we're going to tuck as many strings as we can underneath. And we're going to pay close attention to these corners. Get those threads out. And we're going to start down here, that's white on white. And I think I'm going to take this off so I don't poke it. Now, look how nicely that lines up there. Okay, let's try the top. I'm going to fold this one in just a little bit more. We're having to manipulate it just a little bit because some of these little raw edges were encapsulated in seams before, and now they're not, so. Okay, that one's in. All right. And we can line this one right up on the seam. That looks great. And then on this corner right here, it's a little bit off. Let me find those nice little scissors. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to pin this just the way we did the others, right there on the corners. And then here, when we sew it, what we're going to do is we're going to sew the edge of that red so that it extends over this little piece of white underneath. I don't know if you can see that or not. But we're going to sew it just like that. And we're going to use some really, really fine, invisible style stitches. Just like you sew your binding on by hand, we're going to use that same stitch. We're going to use a white thread because that's going to blend nicely with our background. And I think we're going to be able to fix this really nicely. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm very surprised that we were able to put this in place as quickly as we did. I don't know exactly how long it has been, but it really hasn't been that long. I took a quick break because my microphone was giving me some problems. And I pressed those to get it where we could at least sew one side on by machine. But really, that was pretty dang quick. So now we've got this going in the right direction, as you can see. Make sure you have plenty of light there that you can see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit right here and hand stitch this. And I think I'm going to show you a little bit of the overhead footage as I stitch this. I don't know how clear it will be because I have some limitations of how close I can get to this, but we'll see what happens and show you what it looks like to stitch it. And it is a little difficult because it's much bigger than it needs to be. Okay, so we've got an opening here, and that's where I'm going to go in and put my knot. Okay, so my knot now is inside the quilt. Let's see if I can hold it like this. So here's our seam line that we need to start sewing. So we're going to come in on that top thread. Yeah, this needle may not work because it's a little thick. And we're just going to stitch right on that seam line where it was before. We're stitching in the fold there. I've got one little thread. Back to the stitch line, and then back up in the fold right at the corner of that fabric, and then that's what allows it to be invisible. And we're putting a stitch as close together as the machine was stitching it. And one thing we want to do is we want to pull it tight, but we don't want to pull it tighter than the fabric. So now here's where we've stitched, right from here to here. Not very far, but you can't even tell it's there. And I'm sorry, it's too big for me to get my hand around. I really need to hold it tight right there. Let's see if I can do it that way. And we've got some more threads. This is a time where a pair of tweezers would be helpful. get all those threads out, then your stitching will look very neat. Okay, back on the stitch line. And here we want to grab a hold of not the white thread, excuse me, not the white fabric, but the red fabric. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to knot it right here. Pull it really tight and let it knot. So we've got a knot here. We can tuck that white underneath and then just keep going. And instead of stitching in the white, we're going to stitch in the red. Tuck that red little tail right down in there. There's another stitch. Okay, so we're all the way to here. We've sewn about 1 inch so far. Let's get these threads out of here. Okay, so I'm just going to keep doing that all the way down, and I've got a pin down there sticking me somewhere. It's this one. Okay. We're going to get about halfway down this red piece, and then we're going to knot it again, because this is going to be the one section of your quilt that doesn't have that machine stitching on it. And I'm going through the first layer of fabric and I'm catching some of the batting. I am not going all the way through the backing of this quilt. It's getting more and more difficult to get through there as far as reaching it with my hand. Okay, I'm going to switch up my cameras a moment and see if I can get you a better shot, really super close up with this, so that you can see what I'm doing, because I don't know that I've ever seen someone take out and replace a block in a quilt, so this might be something that's fairly unique to the videos in the quilting world, and I think that sooner or later you may need this skill, so we'll try it and see if we can get you just a little bit better picture. Okay, so let's sew on this a little bit more. I'm still getting something that's sticking me. Okay, all right, so here's where we're stitching. We're stitching this seam right here, and I'm coming in right where I see the holes in the fabric from the machine stitching that was there before, and then I'm going to come in the red and do a little tiny stitch and pull it through. And because I'm catching that red fabric right on the fold, it does not show up. The only thing you can do that would be better is to catch it underneath the fold. Now for a repair like that, I'm not sure how practical that would be. But when we pull it, you can't see it. So we're getting really close to here where this is. So I'm going to take that out. Take one more stitch, and we're up there here, and we just need to hook it to the red, which we will do. There it's on the red. And we're going to put a knot in this one and pull it tight. So look at there. Almost imperceptible. And then we're just going to keep going down this way. I'm going to put another knot here, just like a 1/16 inch away. So we've got a lot of strength there. Pull it nice and tight. And again, I'm catching that top layer of fabric on the background fabric into a little bit of the batting, but I'm not going all the way through. This needle could be a little bit sharper, and that's usually a sign that your needle's too thick. You see that? Just how small that is. Now, where this skill is really handy too is not only fixing your mistakes, but let's say you get a quilt that's been handed down in your family and you love it, but it's got one piece in there that's damaged. And what do? Do you just fold it and put it on a shelf and not use it because you're afraid it's going to get worse? Or do you take the opportunity to fix it? Well, that's going to depend a lot on its value to you and its value in general. Most family quilts, it's going to be a matter of personal value, the emotional value that it has to you, and whether you just want to look at it or use it, obviously. If you had a super old quilt, you might want to investigate if it's worth money and whether mending it might decrease that value. But most of us are not going to have quilts with that kind of impact. Okay, we are to the end, and I am going to end this line of stitching here. Come up through the very point, and I'm going to put a knot. Okay, so that's all stitched in here. So we just need to stitch this way, and we need to come back here and catch this and come up. So probably what I'll do is I'll stitch from down here to the corner and then a separate line of stitching here. But it's going to be the exact same way. So instead of having you watch all of that, I think we'll just stop at this point. Now I do want to take this tail of thread and stick it underneath so we don't have a little string coming out. Okay, that'll take care of that. And then I'll just go around the rest of the way. And I'm going to set my camera back up the way I had it before, and we will show you when it's all done. Okay, we're going to pop back in here because I want to show you I'm all done. Now, I probably took maybe 30 minutes to do the hand stitching on this, and I just used a little paintbrush with a little bit of water to take those blue marks out. And I hope that that video that I had with the really close-up comes out good so you can see that, because there were some little tiny stitches in there, and I wanted to show you how I stitch right on the fold of the material, and that helps those stitches disappear. But here is our repaired square, and it's been put back in place and it lines up like the others. And as you recall, this is the seam that we re-sewed on the machine, and you can see how right here, let me grab this. If you're looking really close, we didn't quite hit the seam line here. It moved over just a little bit, but because we were hand stitching, we really could adjust that on the fly. So now we've got this patch back in here. This is the same piece that was in here. So even if you were repairing something that was older, your fabric is the same age, but we could have replaced it if we needed to. And we hand stitched from back here, about where we started taking them out, all the way up through here, and we knotted and started a new thread, and then we stitched from here up, probably about up to here. And actually I see a little thread there. That's probably the end of our sewing thread, or a piece from the takeout part. And then our final line of stitches was this way. We didn't have to sew anything in the middle because we used the same one. And then, like I said, I used a little paintbrush with some water on right here where we had put those blue disappearing lines in. So there we go. And let's do this while we've got our iron hot. Let's just press it a little bit. You can see where that's still a little damp right there. But there we go. We have fixed the problem with the block now. There's the block, and you can see that this one is lined up the same way as that one is. And pretty quick, less than an hour for sure from start to finish. It's tedious work, it's a lot of hand work, and it's not rocket science so much as it's just patience and tiny stitches is what will get you back where you need it to be. We were very lucky that we didn't have to swap out fabric, but some repairs you may have to do that. I hope this video today has been very helpful to you. If you liked it, can you give us a thumbs up, please? Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can see what's happening next here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. And we do have memberships now. If you're interested in supporting the channel, we have memberships as low as 99 cents a month. Thanks so much again for joining me here today, and we'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio.